to talk about management of power and authority in religious life. If we go back to Vatican II's decree on the adaptation and renewal of religious life, also known as Perfecte Caritatis, in 1965, we hear this, quote, "In professing obedience, religious offer the full surrender of their own will as a sacrifice of themselves to God and are united permanently and securely to God's salvific will." End quote. The model of obedience in this document is, quote, "the example of Jesus Christ, who came to do the will of the Father, and, assuming the nature of a slave, learned obedience in the school of suffering." End quote. According to this model, quote, "religious under the motion of the Holy Spirit subject themselves in faith to their superiors who hold the place of God." End quote. Perfecte Caritatis also describes the profile of superiors. They are accountable for those entrusted to them. They should fulfill their office in a way responsive to God's will. They should exercise their authority out of a spirit of service, with love, and with respect for human dignity and the conscience of those under their authority. They should gladly listen to their subjects and foster harmony among them for the good of the community and the church without diminishing their authority. Let us note a few things about this model of understanding and exercising power and authority in religious life. First, the structure of power and authority is vertical. It presumes a relationship between a superior and a subject. And calling subordinate subjects is a common terminology in the literature of religious life. 2, power and authority are sacralized. It is presumed that those who wield power and exercise authority obtain their mandate from a higher power, that is, God. It is commonly said that, as we heard in the Vatican II document, that superiors hold the place of God. Third element, as a consequence of this second point, to refuse to obey is tantamount to a violation of God's will. Fourth element, the superiors are accountable for their actions and for the decisions they make. Hence the importance of being people of virtue, steeped in prayer, and attentive to the presence and action of the Spirit of God in their lives. From experience, and as we have seen by some evidence, we know that power and authority are liable to being abused. Power and authority can be used as a means of manipulation, oppression, and dehumanization, which is contrary to the preceding points that I made about the importance of service, love, respect for human dignity, listening, and attentiveness to the common good. In the context of synodality, what would a responsible management and exercise of power and authority look like? What does synodal leadership look like in religious life? What is the profile of a synodal leader in religious life? I want to attempt to respond to these questions by painting a picture of synodal leadership and the exercise of power and authority. Now, notice that this is not necessarily limited to religious life. It can apply to all facets of life in the church and in society. But before painting this portrait, it is important to keep in mind that all religious communities offer guidelines, regulations, and rules for what they expect from their leaders and how they are to exercise power and authority. These guidelines draw on long established traditions like Benedictine, Augustinian, and Dominican traditions, not to mention Ignatian Jesuit traditions. There are also monastic traditions and practices of leaders that are documented and narrated for the edification of members of the community. Usually, such religious traditions will describe what responsible exercise of power and authority look like. Now, back to our question. What does synodal leadership look like? What is the profile of a synodal leader? The first thing I want to point out is that it is relational and people-focused. It puts people and relationships before structures. It does not prioritize the maintenance of structure, but promotes the flourishing of the entire community. And so it provides psychological safety for the community to express themselves without fear of intimidation or reprisals. Synodal leadership celebrates people's potential to make them actualities, to allow the potential of every member of the community to come up. Again, I repeat, synodal leadership is person-centered. It relies on encounter as a way of leading, that is, being able to build relationships that facilitates communication among people, helps people to be well-informed. And we're going back, when I say this, to the example of Jesus. Jesus not only said things, but practiced what he preached. So you see, synodal leadership dwells more on the rituals of encounter and takes the situation and context of people in their lives into consideration in order to journey with them in ways in which they feel part of what is happening. Next element, it is inclusive. It opens the tent to everybody, like Jesus, remember, and the woman who anointed Jesus in Matthew 26. Jesus allowed her to be herself. So synodal leadership opens the tent to those we would not normally welcome into the community. It creates room for others to have a voice without monopolizing the conversation. It encourages others to speak and to contribute to the conversation. It listens holistically and pays attention to all facets of people's lives, body language, facial expressions. Next element, synodal leaders see and recognize goodness outside their own group. So a synodal leader who leads a community of religious recognizes that goodness can come from any part of the community. And that goodness is a sign of divine presence. So even if there are people within communities who are considered to be less endowed, divine goodness dwells in them. And recognizing that goodness is a mark of synodal leadership in a religious community. And so, Recognizing goodness makes the leader less defensive or allows the leader not to feel threatened. The next element I want to come to is listening. A synodal leader listens, does not have predetermined answers, listens to who? First, the Holy Spirit, which is an element of prayer. And that leads also to conversion of self and structures. A synodal leader also listens to the signs of the times. Because to lead people aright, one needs to know and have a discerning spirit of the signs of the time. The next element is service. After the example of Jesus Christ, synodal leadership is primarily servant leadership. We see many examples of this in the Gospels. And in religious life as well, this is even more important, where the synodal leader makes himself or herself all things to all people in the community, including being in the shoes of those who are vulnerable. Next element, synodal leadership empowers others, promotes their growth through mentorship. It is not self-sufficient. It listens and it is open to other people's ideas and considers them in decision-making. Actually allows people to bring in their own ideas. Next element, synodal leadership is healing. A synodal leader welcomes people who are broken, who need healing in a broad sense, does not dismiss the weak, does not ridicule the vulnerable, focuses on what will make them grow, what will make them heal, what will make them succeed. Religious communities are people who have been hurt or broken in many ways, just as we have in church and the rest of society. Here is where you need a synodal leader who has the ability to be receptive, who has the ear for the voices of pain and brokenness. A healing listener, listening in order to heal brokenness and woundedness and bring in healing and restoration. Like the Lord, a synodal leader must be close to the brokenhearted. Next element, trust. A synodal leader cultivates trust because he or she holds something in trust for others and is accountable to God as we journey together. And so creating that culture of trust, not being selfish, not holding things to oneself, is a critical element of servant leadership, who is able to give wholeheartedly attention to the needs of their community. In solidarity and cognizance of the environment, a synodal leader is aware of the needs and challenges of their community. A synodal leader would help members of the community see the face of Jesus and make community a place where they are welcome equally, and creates a safe space for people who feel threatened to feel at home. So being a synodal leader is not just about gatekeeping. It ensures that people do not feel as strangers in their communities, but should feel at home. And that means understanding what others are going through. And as I said earlier on, reading the signs of the time, so that he or she becomes present to the situation and listens to real situations instead of generalized narratives. So, when one is a synodal leader, one understands what is going on, not only around, but also within the community, and is attentive to what's going on within the other. Now, this is not particularly restricted to religious communities. It is also true in the church. And the next element is that a synodal leader is able to internalize the implications of listening. Because listening is prelude to acting, and that action needs to be prophetic. That is the ability to address pertinent questions, address real issues, actual context, not dwell on abstractions and distractions. And I want to add one more element. Synodal leadership is not afraid of vulnerability. Synodal leader is able to grow, needs to be nourished, needs to be sharpened, needs to be nurtured, needs to be converted. And so that entails humility, to know oneself as weak and as a sinner who is also in dire need of redemption. Finally, here is a quote from the document. How do we form people, especially those who hold roles of responsibility within the Christian community, to make them more capable of journeying together, listening to one another, and engaging in dialogue? What formation do we offer for discernment and the exercise of authority? What tools help us to read the dynamics of the culture in which we are immersed and their impact on our style of church? This is a quote from the preparatory document of the Synod on Synodality. I hope this presentation offers some answers, even if partial, to these questions. Thank you for listening.